When I was very young, my father gave me a dynamic introduction to Shakespeare's language. By that I mean, besides summertime trips to Shakespeare in the Park, my father's interest in Shakespeare's language became assimilated into the very vernacular of our household. Truly, at times, I felt I was in real danger of having the jelly put out of my eyes, and I was very familiar with what it meant to be unseen from knave to chops. Bizarre as it may seem to some, as it does to my mother, what my father gave me was an understanding that language can be used in many ways. It's called figurative language, and it is the fundamental substance of Shakespeare's work. With the refinement and context given to me by my professors, it has allowed me to pursue my interest in figurative language further. What I've found, though to me now it couldn't be more obvious, is that Shakespeare's characters are formed by language. However, it is important to note, before we go any further, that like the painter who attempts to recreate life in colors and brushstrokes, the playwright animates his characters with strokes of language and figures of speech. In Shakespeare's dramatic works, character is essential. Shakespeare created some of the roundest characters in all of English literature, yet language remains their essential vehicle. To narrow the vast scope of figurative language in Shakespeare's canon, I chose to limit my focus of soliloquy. I chose to limit my focus to moments of soliloquy. A soliloquy is a dramatic passage that is defined by a lone character on stage, speaking to both themselves and the ever-present audience. This is called audience-addressed speech, and it differs from dramatic monologue. In monologue, there are other characters on the stage, either seen or unseen by the speaker. The reason I specifically chose soliloquy as a lens to examine figurative language was for its functional role in the play's structure, but also because of its removal of other social distortions. After all, language itself is a distortion. It's a construct of human creation, and we collectively agree to it. If you take anything from this presentation, I wish for you to think about the fluid nature of language. No language is fixed, neither spoken nor written. As anyone who has ever misinterpreted the meaning of a text message knows, mere tone can change a word's meaning, and written words can be altered by common punctuation. It should be noted to any drama critics in the audience, the soliloquized passages I have selected are of modern edition. So without further disclaimer, I'll move to my first example. This passage is taken from Shakespeare's romantic comedy, The Tempest, also known as a tragicomedy. These plays share many common traits. To name a few, the tragic or potential tragic threat is ultimately resolved in play's end. In this case, it is the tempest incurred by Prospero. Plays like this one especially end in redemption for its characters, as Prospero is redeemed by renouncing his power, and they are usually magical or fanciful in nature. Prospero, after all, is a man, a duke in fact. Well, an exiled duke in fact. But in exile, he has cultivated enormous supernatural power. It is not clear whether his power stems from the enchanted island or within himself, but as we will hear in a moment, his power becomes equal to Jove, also known as Jupiter, Roman god of sky and thunder. Often speculated that, like Prospero's farewell to magic, the passage doubles as Shakespeare's farewell to the stage. There is no essential evidence for this. Yet wouldn't it be interesting if this master playwright chose the private mode of soliloquy as an idea to the public stage? He uses one voice, but it is still directed to the audience. I suggest that Shakespeare keenly understood the power of a character's introspection in regard to the audience's response. For an audience, it could provoke a kind of mirrored introspection in themselves. When listening to this passage, I ask that you try to imagine yourselves cast by Shakespeare as spirits of the island, whom Prospero evokes in its final incantation. Alone, Prospero begins his soliloquy. Ye elves of the hills, brooks standing, lakes and groves, and ye that on sands with printless foot do chase the ebbing Neptune, and do fly him when he comes back. You demi-puppets that by moonshine go the green sour ringlets make, whereof the ewe not bites, and you whose pastime it is to make midnight mushrooms, that rejoice to hear the solemn curfew, by whose aid, weak masters though ye be, I have bedimmed the noontide sun, called forth the mutinous winds, and twixt the green sea and azured fault set roaring war. To the dreaded rattling thunder have I given fire, and rifted Jove's stout oak with his own bolt. The stout-based promontory have I made shake, and by the spurs plucked up the pine and cedar. Graves at my command have waked their sleepers, opened and let them forth by my so potent art. But this rough magic I here abjure. And when I have required some heavenly music, which even now I do, to work mine end upon their senses, that this airy charm is for, I'll break my staff, bury it certain fathoms deep in the earth, and deeper than did ever plummet sound, I'll drown my book. 21st century Shakespearean critic Douglas Brewster said, in order to determine what a soliloquy means, we must first discover how it means. That is essentially the purpose of my presentation. In my paper, I have used what Brewster calls thought paragraphs, segments of passages that are divided into a character's thought processes and manageably unpack the passages by separating connective thoughts. In the consideration of time for this presentation, I have selected to examine Prospero's first thought paragraph, which you will see. The lines are written in predominantly in iambic pentameter, Shakespeare's favorite style of verse. Yet no one knows exactly why, but it could be that it simply works well with the rhythm of the English language. A set of 5 stressed and unstressed syllables create feet, a metrical unit of meaning, and indicate a da-dum, da-dum, da-dum sounding rhythm, much like a heartbeat. Because of the passage's meter, Shakespeare characterizes Prospero as speaking sincerely and from the heart. Verse often distinguished the nobleman from the common peasant. Shakespeare gives other examples of Prospero's learned state. Listen to how the L and F sounds combine to characterize Prospero as an elegant speaker. Ye elves of the hills, standing lakes and groves, and ye that on sands with the printless foot. His invocation of the island has the same light and beautiful sound as the island's pastoral scene. Like the heavenly music and airy charm this passage represents, I suggest that the sound of words also bear a quality of their meaning. Sometimes it is not character, but the audience who is characterized, especially if one imagines that it is also Shakespeare speaking for himself. Prospero credits new spirits by helping enable him in creating his wonders, but in an epithet names them weak masters and reserves the lion's share of the credit for himself. The gradatio of the passage comes at the moment Prospero changes the subject of his address from ye to I. Gradatio is a figure of speech which signifies the climax of a usually poetic passage. In addition, Shakespeare does echo the words I have and have I throughout the passage. Like all echoes, called perseverantia in figurative language, their purpose for emphasis. Prospero's insistence of his power demonstrates that Prospero believes that he alone is in control and characterizes him as possessive, perhaps an effect of his magic. At this time, I would like to redirect your focus to a new passage, one from Shakespeare's most famous tragedies, Hamlet. I have selected a passage from early in the play, during Act 2, Scene 1. It serves as an example of Hamlet's characterization early in the play. And as I hope to demonstrate, his language is demonstrative of Hamlet's characteristic sporadic behavior. When listening to this passage, I ask you to pay close attention to the repetition of sounds, such as to. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Oh God, God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fie on it, ah, fie. 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things sick and gross in nature possess it merely. That it should come to this. But 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not 2. So excellent a king that was to this, Hyperion to a satyr, so loving to my mother that he might not be deemed the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth must I remember. Why, she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month, let me not think on it, frailty thy name is woman, a little month, or ere those shoes were old, which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears. Why, she, even she, oh God, a beast that once discourse of reason would have warred longer, married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules. Within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flush in her galled eyes, she married, oh, most wicked speed, to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. It is not, no, it cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. Okay. Like I've done for Prospero's passage, sectioning my example into 2 thought paragraphs, so I have done for Hamlet's. Oh man, it shows up on the screen. In Hamlet's first line, the repetition of the word to is called an epizoisis, meaning a repetition of a word with no word intervening. It's meant to convey a heartfelt emotional expression. It may also be said that Hamlet's repetition is too much and characterizes Hamlet's overindulgence and lulling in his emotions. The Elizabethans were an oral people, and because of that they gained information through the sound of words. For much of the time that Shakespeare was writing, there was no formalized dictionary that distinguished like-sounding words as separate entities, and thus Shakespeare's language often twins the meaning of words into a single sound. The two-ness in Hamlet's language represents the duality of Hamlet's character, hanging somewhere between emotion and reason for nearly the entire play. Which I would show you, but trust me, it's there. In conclusion, I had to walk a very tight rope writing this. Like Casey said in her presentation, there has to be a distinguishment from the dramatic character to the human, and when you're talking about characterization, it can be an issue. Before I end, I'd like to qualify my research by saying that I have selected language from only 2 plays, and it's only enough to make a suggestion to future scholars.